Hi, everyone. Welcome to this Project Pro podcast on AI monetization. I'm Binny, the co founder of Project Pro. On this podcast, we speak with industry leaders on business use cases that they are seeing and the outcomes they are seeing with AI. In this context, governance always comes up in our conversations, and there's no one better to discuss this than today. We have Francesca. Francesca is a IBM fellow. She is co-chair of IBM's AI Ethics Board as AI Ethics Global Leader. Previously, she was professor of computer science at the University of Padova and the University of Pisa. She also used to be the IEEE member of the Executive Committee on AI Ethics and on the World Economic Forum Global Future Council, co-chair of AI for Humanity. Francesca is also currently the president of AAAI, which is a worldwide association of AI researchers focused on the advancement of AI. Thank you for taking time, Francesca. Welcome to this podcast.
Thank you.
Um, Francesca, to begin with, we would love to understand in your current role as co-chair of IBM's AI Ethics Board, what are your priorities? What is your mandate in that role?
Yeah, so the IBM AI Ethics Board is our internal centralized governance for everything the company does around AI ethics, whether it's education or software tools to help developers address AI ethics issues, or high-level principles and their concrete implementation in everyday's job of everybody, like risk assessments, and so all the dimensions of AI ethics and safety, and including also many partnerships that we have with other companies, other stakeholders, civil society organizations, and multi-stakeholder organizations in general. So the board has many members representing all the business units of IBM, research, product, software, consulting, but also non-technical ones like legal, government relations, communications, marketing, so all the business units, because they are all involved in their different roles in making sure that the AI technology that we build and we use and we deliver to our clients is responsible and respects some principles and values that we think are important.
Yep, so very important role given the pace at which AI use cases are rolling out. So could you help us understand, uh, like there's AI governance, we hear that a lot, there's AI ethics. Is AI ethics a dimension of AI governance, or how do these things fit in? What are the various dimensions of AI governance? That'd be good to hear.
Yeah, so AI governance means many different things. So one of them, like we said, is this corporate governance that needs to be put in place, like, for example, in our case, in the form of this AI ethics board that supervises everything that the company does around AI ethics. In that dimension of AI governance, it's important, for example, that the board is centralized, meaning that it's company-wide representing. Some other companies have similar mechanisms, but they sit inside a business unit. And I see that in that case, they sometimes struggle to be impactful on other business units, of course. So the board or something similar needs to be well positioned in the governance of the company, so that it can be impactful to all the business units. Also, this board or similar body uh, cannot just be an advisory board.
Mhm.
It has to be able to make decisions such that we cannot sign this deal with the client because it does not follow our principles, let's say. So that's another important thing, because if it's just an advisory board, then business units may decide to go their own way, and they may not feel as strongly that we need to really maintain the alignment with our principles in order to be a good force, a good positive impact on society, but also to maintain the trust of our clients in the long term. Then there are other aspects of governance that are more technical, let's say. For example, the governance of the AI life cycle. And with machine learning and now with generative AI, the AI life cycle has become more and more complex and long in terms of phases, no? From all the phases like data collection, training of the model on the data, and testing, and then the development and so on of the foundation model, of a large language model, of another foundation model, and then all the similar phases to build the downstream models, to fine-tune this model on domain-specific or task-specific scenarios, which allows them to build the overall system that is going to be deployed and used. So the life cycle is very long, and in all these phases, developers need to be able to assess some AI ethics issues, such as bias or transparency or explainability or privacy and so on, with different capabilities at different phases. And they need, and in order to do that, they need tools, like even software tools that can help doing that, like to identify bias and mitigate it. But they also, more importantly, need to understand these issues, because you may understand that senior developers, for example, they grew up and they were educated when issues of bias or other explainability in AI were not in their training period. So they need to be really helped in understanding what these issues are, and where and how to use the software tools that we provide them. So they need to understand that in this very long life cycle, they need to include additional steps, technical, some of them technical in using the tool, but some of them even non-technical and related really to only the governance, like assigning responsibilities for people that can do the mitigation, can do the testing, be responsible for the result of the bias testing, for example, and so on. And most of all, given that the life cycle is so long and complex and may involve not just the same group of people that do the whole thing, they need to be transparent about it. So they need to be helped with templates, with automatic recording of everything that they do to make sure that the AI system that they develop has the right properties, so that the downstream people that will do the later steps can understand what has been done, and so they can do their steps in the most appropriate way, or use the AI system in the most appropriate way. So that's the governance of the AI life cycle. Then there is another dimension of governance that has to do with the risk assessment of the use cases. So there are internal processes about how to assess the risk of a use case. For example, at IBM, is the board itself that, when needed, assesses the risk of all the use cases, of all the solutions that we deliver to our clients. And this assessment, of course, has to do with the assessment of the actual AI system that is being built, whether the technology is appropriate, is good enough, it respects all the AI ethics important principles. But also, it also needs to consider how the technology is going to be used, Okay, so whether that technology is fit for the use that the client is asking, and it also assess the user itself. Some users are more trustworthy than others, maybe, and so that has to be taken in consideration in assessing the overall risk. So that internal process is also part of the AI governance. Um, and then there are also, and this also is connected to my current research project because I'm part of IBM research and I also lead some AI research project. There are also more and more AI systems that are built with the ability of doing introspection and metacognition, meaning that they can have their own internal governance that can understand what tools to use to solve a specific problem. So AI systems now are not just a model, trained on on data, but are systems that have a complex architecture with many different pieces. A model is just one piece, but there may be other more logic-based, let's say, symbolic AI parts that can solve the problem when it is appropriate to use them. And then there can be this governance part module that can really be the arbiter of what is best to use and how to combine these different. So governance can be even embedded inside an AI system.
Mhm.
And another, again, important thing that we learned about all these governance dimensions is that all these dimensions need to be integrated. So at IBM, we have what we call the integrated governance program that because these governance dimensions, they share data and information. They're not completely separate and they depend on each other. So one needs to know information about the how, I don't know, the AI at this board needs to know how the developers build the AI system. But on the other hand, the AI at this board builds the education for these developers. So they're all dependent on each other. And without integration, there would be a lot of redundant work, a lot of repeated work in these different dimensions, which could lead to contradictions, to gaps, and to lack of adoption also of all these governance processes. So all this was something that we understood over the years because at the beginning these dimensions were kind of separate, but people were complaining because we were basically asking very similar questions in the different processes. So we really understood that to increase adoption and also quality of the solutions, we needed to integrate all of them.
Makes sense. So it's very thorough. So you're basically saying the AI governance can operate at the life cycle level, at the use case level, and then there could be
At the
a
corporate level, at the
corporate level.
corporate level. And that's another dimension of governance is also the compliance part.
Mm.
More and more, there are regulations that are coming out around AI, like the European AI Act that has been approved recently in Europe, but many others as well all over the world. But not just regulations. There are international standards. There are norms. There are, voluntary commitments. So how do you another aspect of governance is to make sure that what you build is compliant with these regulations and norms.
Makes sense. So, Francesca, if I'm in a Fortune 100 company and I am tasked with putting together an AI governance board, and today is my day one, where do I start? Like, what is the foundation do I use? Is it the mission of the company? What do I use to point me in the right direction? Is it my feeling of what is right, what is not right? Like, so where do I start? What do I use as my guiding post? And what assets do I need to put out so others are going to follow that?
Well, at the beginning, everybody started with principles, no, that are defined by the whole company. So not just by the AI at its board or by one person in isolation, but by the governance of the company, so by the board, the CEO, the SVPs of the company. So they all have to agree to these high level principles. So IBM has three of them, but and then and then the board is built by, again, people representing all the business units. But there are people that are not just anybody in that business unit. There are people then that once the board makes a decision that can be relevant for that business unit, they can go home and have that decision implemented in the business unit. So they must have some um, role that allows them to really implement that decision in that business unit. And then the task of the board at the beginning is to really decide how these high level principles are going to be concretely implemented in the company. And of course, there are the whole framework doesn't need to be the same in every company because it depends a lot on the business model of that company. Now,
Right.
whether it's a consumer AI company, whether it's a company or enterprise AI. For example, IBM is not a consumer AI company; it's an enterprise AI. We build AI solutions for other companies. This is a specific business model. So even the AI ethics framework and the governance is built thinking about this business model, right? So so that's where to start. Principles, choose people that can represent this business unit. Another thing that we did early on is not only to have one member of or more for each business unit in the board, but also to identify another person for each business unit, which is not a board member, but is called the focal point. And this is the person that is tasked to link the board to that business unit by bringing down education about the decisions of the board that may impact that business unit. So disseminate, educate, and so on. So from the board to the business unit, but also in the other direction, from the business units to the board to understand maybe the challenges that maybe some decisions to be implemented in the business units. Maybe board didn't think about challenges that the business units can encounter. So challenges, feedback on the decisions, and also often business units may come up with some solutions or some ways to address some AI ethics issues specific for the business unit that then sometimes we have escalated to the level of the board and then scaled at the level of the whole company. So some grassroots initiative in a specific business unit that can be escalated to the whole company. And the focal point is very important because it has this bi-directional link between the board and the business unit. And also for another reason, because the focal point is the first person that examines and assesses the risk of the solutions that come out of that business unit and decides whether the risk is enough to be discussed with the board, or it can be handled by the focal point themselves. So that's otherwise all the solutions, all the deals with every client will be brought up to the board, which is not possible to scale given the amount of thing. But again, this is something that we put in place in a company as large as IBM, that of course one board cannot look at all the solutions that we build for our clients all over the world. For other kinds of companies that maybe are much smaller, then you don't need that complex, architecture of the governance.
Yeah. Makes sense. And this focal point, so for example, let's say we take a marketing team inside a company, the marketing team has a focal point. So the marketing team is building an AI use case to generate creative messages for their campaigns. The focal point is kind of responsible to make sure the board's directives are kind of implemented in that use case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, now you are mentioning IBM role of not only, or the company role of not only building a solution for somebody else, but also building a solution to use it internally. So, for example, one use case that we looked at came from HR. Human resources, that's a business unit, also represented at the board,
Yeah.
that decided to use an large language model for internal, it's called Ask IBM. So internal asking about anything, that all the processes that internal to IBM, how do I do this? How can, and so on. And so that came to the board for discussion about the risk assessment. And in that case, for example, the board requested that that solution that we use internally make sure that the user are aware of various issues with the large language models, like, for example, that they can hallucinate. So that if you ask factual information, then go and ask also trusted, go and look also at trusted resources. Second thing, to make sure that you don't include like personal or confidential information in a prompt. So all the things about awareness of the capabilities, but also of the limitations and issues with that particular use case. So what the board did is said, okay, we understand this. You can help doing looking for internal processes, policies. You can help with, I don't know, document summarizations or other things that LLM can do, but you have to be aware. So that when you use it, you have a big sign at the beginning and also present on the side every time you interact, that makes you aware of the capabilities, limitations, and the issues with that solution.
So that goes back to your previous point where you're saying these governance directives, they are implemented as part of the use case, but there's also a separate governance module in the solution that checks maybe the output of the model before it goes to the user. Is that how it is? Or
Sometimes, but I think in that case it was really the system was a large language model. The system was an interactive so a system was the system to interact with a large language model. So, but of course, large language models are built not just by training and period, like they're trained a large amount of data, but then there are further phases that help align this model to some values that are important, so that the content that they generate is not undesired, is not harmful, is not violent, is respectful, and so on. So all the other values that you want to see in the generated content.
yeah. So it seems like through the governance process, there needs to be a lot of documentation on what are the directives, what is getting done. How is that done today? That kind of
Well, we have an internal website about AI ethics that contains all the decisions that have been made by the board, and the board not only makes decisions, but also in assessing use cases almost every week, many use cases, um, we also gather some more general guidelines, because sometimes we assess similar use cases, assess the risk of similar use cases. So after a while, we realize that there is a pattern there. And so we put together documents that give general guidelines that can be useful for teams also thinking about building a use case in that space. Or we also publish internally and also externally documents about, for example, what we mean. We have a principle about AI that should augment human intelligence and not replacing it. So what we mean by that with respect to automation, for example. Or there are we publish documents about the all the risks in foundation models. So risks, definition of each risk, difference with risks in previous versions of AI, like traditional machine learning, mitigation guidelines and methodologies and tools and so on. So more awareness about what you can do about each one of those risks.
Yeah.
Or documents about for example, around bias, to help developers understand what the bias in AI means. For example, a few years ago, when we started doing this thing about bias, some teams were thinking that if their project did not have any protected variable like race, gender, in the project, explicitly mentioned in the project, then there was no issue of bias. So we published a document about proxies of these protected variables, that even if you don't have them, maybe you have other variables in your project and maybe are proxies of the protected variable. And so that means that bias is not, you still have to consider bias even if no protected variable is there. So all these documents are there to help people, and they're all put together. We also have a glossary, because at the beginning, several years ago, it was not even clear in such a large company. Many people were using the word AI, not only AI ethics, but also fairness, explainability, in many different definitions, with many different definitions. So we put a glossary of what the board means with that. So there are a lot of internal documentation about what the board does and
Yeah.
how it can be impacting the various business units.
Nice. And as a AI governance ethics leader yourself, and all the hundreds of customers you speak to, what are the biggest burning problems and challenges that you face in implementing governance, AI governance in an enterprise?
Well, when we speak with clients, there are many things that we talk about. So first of all, um, some clients actually they push us to do our best around these issues in AI ethics. So some clients said, okay, you're giving me this piece of technology to solve one of my problems, but what did you do about bias? What did you do about that? So show me. And so we have to be convincing in telling them with facts and with test results and so on. So some clients even have like a spreadsheet to fill from their vendors, so including us, to say, okay, tell exactly what you did, what you're doing around bias, what you have in place for explainability, for data issues, and so on. So another topic is that many clients are trying to build their own internal governance. So not only they want our solutions in terms of technology, but also they want our help in building their own internal governance around AI. So we advise them, giving our story and our experience and lessons that we learned, and then we help them tune it to their specific environment. And then other clients, and this is another work stream where the board is working currently. Other clients also say, okay, we understand this AI ethics and the value of it, but why should I invest in AI ethics? What is the return on my investment on AI ethics? So, and this came from a client, this question, and out of this question, the board really started a very interesting work stream in really understanding the ROI of AI ethics, which is not just a short-term quantitative ROI, but is much more holistically be seen as an ROI in terms of more long term also return, but not just quantitative, but also in terms of building value inside the company that can be then given you a return later on. So we published papers, we did a lot of things about this ROI of AI ethics, because it's true that some companies, and we interviewed more than 50 companies in this study, and that was very interesting to see how some companies have a really reactive approach to AI ethics, saying when the regulation will come that translates AI ethics into some law, I will comply with regulation. So very real, because if I don't comply, then I risk cost of paying a fine and so on. But other companies instead are much more proactive and saying, I want to build everything inside my company to address AI ethics issues well, not because there is already a regulation that forces me to do that, because otherwise I'm not compliant, but because I understand that this builds value for my company, builds differentiator, competitive advantage, so it's good now or later. It will be good for my company. So it was interesting to see these two different approaches of various companies around AI ethics in understanding the value of investing in AI ethics.
Well, makes sense. I mean, the because the long-term impact, like you said, on the company's brand, the customer trust, things like that, it's tough to quantify with an ROI, but has long-term impact on the company. Yeah.
Yeah, and this long-term thing also is connected to this choice of having the governance body sitting at the level of the whole company.
Mm.
Because if you distribute this governance into the single project teams, they may not see as clearly the value to the company,
Yeah.
because they are focused on their project, on their team, on their how they're going to be evaluated at the end of the year, things like that. So that's since there is a long-term and brand reputation and so value for AI ethics investment, this is better seen and evaluated at the level of the whole company.
Makes sense. Yeah. Another area of interest for you, Francesca, is the whole concept of alignment. Could you help us understand what is alignment when applied to AI?
Yeah, so alignment means that you would like these AI systems that you're going to use to be aligned with human values. And for example, we mentioned already several times bias. No, the value of fairness is an important human value. So you would like this AI system, when they're used, to not generate discriminations among different groups of people. Other values may be privacy, of course, another important value, but also it may be especially in content generation and interaction with like large language model, for example, it can be respect or not being harmful, not being violent, and so on. So, and as well as truth. Truth is also another important thing for human societies, right? So the alignment with these human values means that you want to, let's take fairness, for example, you want to make sure that this system behaves according to a definition of fairness, because not only there are many human values that you would like to be aligned with, but even if you choose just one, fairness, there has been a famous tutorial in an AI conference several years ago that that proposed 21 definitions of fairness. And they were all different and they were all reasonable, but appropriate in some scenarios and not in others. So
Mhm.
already when you say, oh, I want to be aligned with fairness, but which definition of fairness? So you have to be really aware of how and where the system is going to be used to understand what's the definition of fairness that you would like to be aligned with. And then, given that, then you are looking for eliminating the bias that is going to impact that definition of fairness that you have chosen as the appropriate one. So alignment is with human values, but of course it's a very vague term, because then when you go and look, there are many values that may interact with each other, and also for each values there may be many definitions.
Makes sense. And I, I mean, earlier, before we started the podcast, you were talking about the importance of open versus closed models. What is the significance of alignment with open versus closed models?
Well, okay, so an open model is a model where you can use it, no? But you are kind of a passive user. You can use something that others have put in place, doing their own, value alignment process and whatever. But and sometimes there are technical reports that tell, give some information about how the system has been built, what has been done to test the value alignment, so but you don't really have visibility internal to the system to be able to really understand, what has been done and what are the results of that. So you are a passive user of a model that has been built by a company. Um, in an open model instead, released through an open source license, or so then you not only you can be a user like of a closed one, but you can also in some sense become a co-creator of this model, because you are given a base model that has been trained, tested, value aligned, and so on. But then you can look and even discover possible vulnerabilities of this model. You can add guardrails to the model. You can fine tune the model with your own specific data. And so, in some sense, you are building a model on top of the base one that can be more targeted to your needs. So you are more in charge of the kind of AI that you can use, rather than being a passive user of an AI system that somebody else has built. So the connection with value alignment, that you can you can have this system aligned to your specific values, because values can not only be these kind of values that we think are kind of universal, but they're never universal. At least not the priorities are not universal, but anyway, not necessarily. But there are maybe values that are societal norms, of specific societal norms, or specific policies inside the company or in environment. So these are also kind of values, and so you can tune the model that somebody else has built to your own specific values, and that in your environment.
And with alignment and open and closed models, and like you said, the importance of open models, right? Does it concern you that in the world of open models, it's still dominated by two or three very large companies like Meta and Google, and does that concern you?
Well, I mean, it doesn't concern me because, well, first of all, also IBM releases everything. All our models that are called Granite models. They're all released open source. But it doesn't concern me because these are open source again. Yes, there are few companies,
Yeah.
but these are open source. So that means that. Not only what I said, so that you can use and become a co-creator of your own, specific model that is better suited to your needs, but also all the talent in the world that can improve AI, scrutinize AI, is able to do that. And so the power imbalance between the companies that can build these models and those that have less resources is much reduced, because now even people in organizations that maybe have less resources and are not able to build their own large language model, but they can fine tune, they can improve and scrutinize those models. So even people in universities that usually have less resources than in companies, or people in even countries that maybe don't have enough resources, or they can participate. So all the talent is engaged in, possibly, if they want, um, and and this reduces this power imbalance, really, and gives to everybody this agency in building your own specific AI system.
Yeah, that's helpful, Francesca. And just to wrap up, for someone who wants to begin a career in AI governance or AI ethics, what guidelines or best practices do you have for somebody like that?
Well, first of all, in AI ethics, you find two kinds of people. You find people like me that come from a AI computer science background, so technical background, scientific background, and then they move into trying to understand the impact of the technology on society. So they move into AI ethics from the technical background. And then you find the opposite people, that they come from philosophy, psychology, sociology. So people that are expert in understanding the impact of a technology, and then they come into AI. So you find these two kinds of people that work together, which is the main thing, that AI ethics is not a monodisciplinary field of study, but it really needs all these different people with different background. And so people that want to start in AI ethics, now there are many, not only inside companies, there are many openings about AI ethics teams, but also there are many openings in universities that are moving towards more multidisciplinary positions, rather than being siloed position. Either you are a philosopher, or you are an AI person, or you're and there are many institutes for AI ethics. I mean, there are in the US, there are many, but also in UK, there are many institutes for AI, Oxford, Cambridge, many other places, Europe, but all over the world, there are more and more institutes that tries to, like think tanks about AI ethics. But then inside the company, instead, what you do, you are positioned that are kind of think tank positions, but also you get much more concrete in implementing this AI ethics thinking into, and discussions into, every day, what people do every day in building and using the technology. So there are different kinds of positions, and depending, but there are many that are coming up, really.
Okay. That's very helpful career advice, Francesca. On that note, thank you so much for taking time to do this. This has been
Thank
extremely
you.